If the UCAT says that pigs fly, then pigs fly, and accept it as that. If you're wasting time getting your little mouse, scrolling down to the next button and then clicking the answer, that is a lot of time that you could be using to actually work out the abstract reasoning. I swear this simple tip saved my UCAT. Hey guys, it's Shola, and today's video is going to be really helpful. It's going to be how to ace your UCAT and get the highest score, and we're going to go into every single aspect of the UCAT in detail. So be sure to grab your cup of tea or a little bit of water and grab your notepad, and let's get into it. So this video is kindly sponsored by Medify. So Medify is basically an online resource where you get access to thousands of questions. This was my main resource when revising for UCAT, and I honestly don't know how I would have done it without it. And this couldn't be a better collaboration because I solely used Medify during my application process.
There's over 20,000 practice questions, 21 mocks and 40 mini mocks. And Medify has recently announced the price drop of £30 per month subscription. The thing I love about the UCAT practice the most on Medify is that you get personalized feedback based on your scores, which helps you to improve on your weaknesses. With over 50 hours of video tutorials, you don't have to look elsewhere. Be sure to check it out using the link in my description, and let's get back into the video.
So whether you're watching this at the start of your UCAT journey, the middle or the end, I guarantee that this will help you and will help you score better in your UCAT. When I was doing my UCAT, there was not as many resources as there are now, and there's a lot of things that I wish I would have known then that I'm going to tell you now that will really help you. So let's just jump right in. So in this video, I'm going to go over general advice for the UCAT, and then I'm going to jump into each section of the UCAT. I'm going to go into abstract reasoning, quantitative reasoning, verbal reasoning, decision making, and also the situational judgment test. Okay, so let's start off with general UCAT advice. So my first thing I would say is book your UCAT strategically. And what I mean by this is to book your UCAT so that it's just enough time that you can revise and you won't get burnt out. So a mistake that I see people doing, and a mistake I made myself, is I booked my UCAT too late in advance. So I did my UCAT in September and I was revising from before school even ended. And this was just very overwhelming because you initially have this huge burst of motivation. You're like, this is a new exam format, I want to get to know everything, I want to do as many questions as possible. But eventually you start to burn out, and that motivation just goes down and down and down until you're hardly revising. Then when it comes to the UCAT, you're surprised because you lost all the skills that you've been building before. The problem is that people think they can cram for the UCAT, but the UCAT is actually an aptitude test, which means it tests your ability at that current moment. It's not something that you can cram for, or something that you can spend years and years revising to get better. It's just something that you have to build a strategy for, and that shouldn't take you too long. So I would say the perfect time to book and start revising would be 8 weeks. The way that you improve in UCAT is through practice. If you don't have enough time to practice before your UCAT, then you will be shocked when you see the questions. You're not going to be prepared, and your grade on the day is very risky. Like, you might not get a high enough UCAT score to go to the school you want to go to, but then on the other hand, if you do have too much time, you'll end up burning out and you won't revise as much, and then you'll lose all the skills that you've been building up. So it's really just a test of time. Okay, so now in terms of actually revising, I would say that the first thing you should do, which a lot of people have recommended, is to do a practice mock without any outside knowledge and without any practice. This will basically just test what you know currently and how your brain works, and then this will ultimately allow you to see your weaknesses and then work on those, as opposed to going through every single section equally and wasting time. Because at the end of the day, each section in the UCAT is equally as important, and you don't want to be amazing at one and then really bad in the other because you didn't prioritize that one. So definitely do a mock first thing. I recommend doing this on the UCAT official website, and you can basically get used to the interface, the way shortcuts work, the calculator, because you know that you won't get a real calculator in person. And you can also see how you do with timings, so you'll see what section you spend the most time on, which section you run out of time on. It's just really helpful to see where you are at the start, so that you can tailor your revision onwards to what you're worst at. If you are unsure about timing, here are the recommended timing for each question. And obviously this is not going to be the same for everyone, but this is just the starting point for you, and then you can see which timings are too much or too little. The verbal reasoning section is 21 minutes, so that works up to 28 seconds per question. Quantitative reasoning section is 24 minutes, so that works out to be 40 seconds per question. The abstract reasoning section is only 13 minutes, so that works out to be 14 seconds per question. The decision making section is 31 minutes, and that works out to be 66 seconds per question. Decision making is obviously the section where you have the most leeway and the most time. For situational judgment, it's 26 minutes, so that works out to be 23 seconds per question. So if you just memorize those timings and try to use them during your mock, that will also help you, and you'll see whether they're realistic or not and what needs to change. My third general advice is to skip. All the questions in the UCAT are worth the same amount of marks. It's not like maths where you have that big 6 mark at the end and you have little 1 markers here and there. Each question, whether it's easy or hard, is the same amount of marks. That's why in the UCAT they tend to put the harder questions towards the start, because they know that candidates will waste their time and have less time for the easy questions towards the end. So if you look at a question and it's taking you like more than 30 seconds to work it out or understand it, then guess one, flag it and skip, and try not to mix up your guesses. If you're going to guess questions, pick a lucky letter and stick to that. So if you want to pick A, then pick that throughout instead of mixing between A, B, C, D, because this just decreases your chances that the guess is right. So once you've guessed something, flag it and move on. The UCAT is a test of time, and you shouldn't dwell on questions that you don't understand. You're bound to not understand some of the questions in the UCAT, and that's okay, but just try to get as much marks as you can. Try to implement this kind of idea from the start of your revision so you're used to it, because I know a lot of people, they don't really like this idea of skipping questions. People like to do their exams in the order of the questions that is set, like GCSEs, A-levels, but this is not GCSEs and this is not A-levels. Do not use the same methodology that you use for those for UCAT. And now my fourth general advice is to learn keyboard shortcuts. They will save your life and they will save you so much time. For abstract reasoning, you literally have 13 seconds per question. If you're wasting time getting your little mouse, scrolling down to the next button and then clicking the answer, that is a lot of time that you could be using to actually work out the abstract reasoning. So here are the main shortcuts that I recommend that you learn. So Alt-N brings the next question. Alt-P puts it back to the previous question. Alt-F is what flags the question, and Alt-C is what brings the calculator onto the screen. And if I find any more, I'll link them down in the description. But basically, learn these shortcuts like the back of your hand and try to use them from the start of your practice. It will just make life a lot easier for you. Okay, so now let's move into the specific sections of the UCAT. Let's start off with abstract reasoning. Abstract reasoning was literally the bane of my existence. I actually didn't know I was going to pass the UCAT. I was so baffled as to how this related to anything medicine wise or dentistry wise, but I guess it's just one of those things that you have to do. So here is how to improve your abstract reasoning score. So abstract reasoning basically tests your ability to pick up on patterns. Unlike the other sections, which are just like speed reading, doing little calculations, this is kind of a new way of testing you. Like, I personally haven't been tested in that way before. I think that's why I was so bad at it initially. Some people are naturally good at it and some people are not. You can guess what side I was on. And my best advice for this, even though you guys are gonna hate me for this, is practice. There's no other way. You just need to expose your brain to so many patterns that you can start to pick them up, and often patterns can repeat themselves. So the more questions that you do, the more quick your brain will be at recognizing the pattern and then solving the question. So it's honestly just a game of practice. When you first see a question, you should use GANs. It's basically shape, color, arrangement, number, and size, and you should just go through that. Have a go-to rule that you'll use for any question if you get stuck. Initially, when looking at a question, it can get really overwhelming, so look at one shape at a time, take it one step at a time. I know I said you have 13 seconds for each question, but if you spend time working out the pattern, once you get that pattern, it will be much easier for you to get the answers and you'll spend less time. So honestly, prioritize understanding the pattern first. If you spend more than 30 seconds and you still can't see it, it's time to start guessing and then you can move on. And things that are unlikely to be correct is if you have a negative rule, so try to have positive rules. So try to say that every shape in the boxes have even size, not every shape in the box doesn't have even size. Like just try to make it easier for your brain to understand. And rules that contain or at least tend to be incorrect, so try to avoid them. One person I recommend watching, especially their videos in abstract reasoning, is Karma Medic. Honestly, his videos saved my life and I'm sure they've saved many others, so be sure to check his videos out and watch them. Watch all of the ones on abstract reasoning, but the thing is, when you're watching it, you have to do this. Before he starts to explain his answer, pause it and try to work out yourself. If you can work it out yourself, brilliant. If you can't, then listening to his reasoning and how he got to the right answer, it really helps you to start recognizing these patterns by yourself. Really important that you limit your resources and limit the amount of people that you listen to advice from, because at the end of the day, it gets really overwhelming and you start to doubt yourself and doubt your own ability, and that's where the problem lies. So I really recommend that you only use 1 or 2 resources max, and the main resource that you should be using is Medify. When you're starting to revise abstract reasoning, do not do timed timed practice, you actually want to understand how to work out the patterns. Then once you're comfortable doing that, then you can do the timed practice. And also write down a list of the common rules that you see and just revise over these, because these tend to come up a lot. And I do have a list of rules that I found online thanks to this person. I'll link them down in the description. I'll also link any other rules that I found. Let's move on to quantitative reasoning. So quantitative reasoning is not the worst section in my opinion. The problem lies in wasting time, in not knowing equations off by heart, and not knowing how to use a calculator shortcut. The first thing I recommend is that you memorize all of these equations. There's no way around it, just memorize them. It will save you time in the exam. You shouldn't really have to think about the equation. It should already be on the tip of your mind. Definitely memorize all of these equations here. And also memorize conversions as well. So for example, how you convert a meter to a mile. So when you're practicing, never ever use a physical calculator. You're not going to get one in the exam under any circumstances. So just start to get used to the on-screen calculator. When you're doing questions, if you see a question that will require many steps, skip the question and come back to it later. I'm sure there's questions that will be more simple and they're also worth the same mark. And after practicing quantitative reasoning for a week or so, try to only do timed practice onwards, because it's not the maths that often makes people slip up, it's the timing. So they run out of time and they don't get to complete every single question. So just know your weaknesses. And guys, I swear this simple tip saved my UCAT. Learn calculator shortcuts. So obviously I've told you guys about the Alt-C to bring up the calculator, but have you actually heard of the memory function? So the memory function essentially allows you to store numbers in memory and record them and use them in calculations later. This saves you time instead of you writing down the number on your whiteboard and then having to put it back into the calculator. Plus you might end up typing the number wrong, so it's just not really a good way of going about it. So how you use the memory function is you basically have the number that you want in the calculator and then you press M+. This basically puts it inside of the memory. And if you want to subtract something from this, you can then type the number that you want to subtract from the number in the memory and just click M-. And then if you want to clear the memory, then click MRC twice. As well as this, instead of clicking the numbers on the screen, because that can be a time waster, make sure that your keyboard is on num-lock and then type the numbers that you actually want using the keyboard, and that's just much faster as well. Okay, so now let's move on to verbal reasoning. So verbal reasoning, I thought I was really good at it, but I wasn't. And let me tell you why. Verbal reasoning is all about time. I'm sure all of us can do comprehension. Like if we were given 1 hour to do comprehension, we would ace it. But the thing is, the time makes you slip up. So basically, a lot of the questions in the verbal reasoning are very sneaky. Some of them put not in front of statements. Some of them just try to catch you out. The thing that you should do is initially practice without being timed. Just understand how the section works, how the questions work. From then on, from a little short taster, you should do time practice onwards, because time is what slips people out in the verbal reasoning. It's not that people don't know how to read. Like, I'm sure if you're applying for medicine or dentistry, you know how to read. It's the timing, so please focus on that. So it's recommended that you read the question first before reading the passage. This just allows you to see what you're searching for, and then once you find that sentence that contains the information for the question, you should read around that statement. So you should read the sentence before and the sentence after. Skim through the passage, but don't skim too fast to the point where you're missing out on key information. Also focus on key names, key dates, changes in thinking, general changes. Just try to keep them in your mind whilst you're doing the questions, because you don't want to be reading over the same thing multiple times just to understand it. And if a sentence contains something like not, pay close attention to that, because that can really change your answer from correct to wrong. And if you spend more than 30 seconds on a question, guess it, flag it and move on. If you are 90% certain that your answer is correct, click the answer and then move on. You don't have time to get that 100% certainty for every single answer, so just follow your gut and move on. So decision making is very practice based. You need to practice a lot to be able to make and understand the rules. And for Venn diagrams, here are some basic calculations that you need to know. So whenever you see and, that means that you multiply the numbers, and when you see or, that means that you add the numbers. And a lot of these questions are graph based, so really practice on trying to extract information from graphs correctly. Try not to make assumptions questions from outside knowledge. Don't take any outside knowledge into the UCAT. So if the UCAT says that pigs fly, then pigs fly, and accept it as that. Don't try to bring in any outside knowledge and try to use that to get the right answer. It might not be right. And when choosing your answer, be sure to pick an answer which is based more on statistics, studies, reports, rather than opinion and assumptions, because these answers are less likely to be right. And this section is where your whiteboard is the most useful. So as you know, you have more time on decision making than any other section in the UCAT, so use this wisely. Use your whiteboard to write down any complicated logic puzzles, so you can use symbols just to simplify it and make it easier for your brain to understand. As well as this, because you have more time, then make sure that you go through all of the questions that you flagged, as you'll probably finish a bit early. Now finally, let's talk about situational judgment. So situational judgment was personally my favorite section, and it was the one that I had to practice the least. Modified practice is almost exactly what came up on my exam, so definitely be sure to utilize it. The most important thing for situational judgment is to not do what you would personally do. If your friend was cheating and you wouldn't personally report them, don't listen to your inner gut. Listen to the angel on your shoulder that's telling you the best thing to do. If someone's cheating, according to situational judgment, it should be reported. And there's other things that you may not agree with. You just have to answer the most ethically you can. So if you didn't know, the situational judgment is based on a panel of doctors. They decide what the correct answer is. It might not be the correct answer to you. You should just try to envision yourself as being that panel of doctors and what they would choose. And once you practice situational judgment a few times, you start to pick up on their reasoning and their thinking behind the answers. One of the most important things about situational judgment is that it's based on the 4 pillars of medicine. So these pillars include autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. So let me get into what all of these mean. So autonomy basically means that the patient has a right to do what they want with their body. So let's say that a patient is refusing life-saving treatment. You have to respect their decision and just accept it. You can't be argumentative. You can't try to force something on them. It's just not right. And beneficence is that you want to do good. You want to do something that's in the patient's best interest. Non-maleficence is that you don't want to do harm to the patient. Justice means that you have to give equal treatment to all, despite ethnicity, sexuality, race, education. Everyone deserves equal treatment. And one thing to note is that you do get partial marks if you're close to the right answer. So if you're within one answer close to the actual answer, you do get a partial mark. So that's actually helpful. And when choosing an answer which is the most appropriate, you should choose something that directly addresses the situation. So something might be appropriate, but it might not be very appropriate if it doesn't tackle the key issue in the situation. And be sure to look at the role of the person involved. The answer would depend on if it's a doctor, if it's a student, if it's a consultant, if it's a patient. It will all depend. So guys, that is pretty much the end of the video. I really hope it helped you. I really hope it was very comprehensive and you got a lot from it. And if you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And definitely comment down below of any other videos you would like to see, for example, on personal statements, university life, A-levels. Let me know. See you guys next time. Bye.